The government tried to hide the Epstein files. Powerful names protected, illegal redactions. Congress responds with impeachment. This is the story Washington doesn't want you to know. Stay until the end. Look, I'm going to be very direct with you. What the Department of Justice did last Friday wasn't just an administrative failure. It was a deliberate violation of federal law. And I don't say that lightly, but based on concrete facts that are there for anyone to verify. Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie, the congressmen who led the bipartisan effort to force the release of the Epstein files, made it clear that the partial release with massive redactions on Friday violates both the spirit and the letter of the law. And when I say massive redactions, I'm serious. At least 550 pages of the released documents were completely blacked out. Completely. All black. Nothing to read. Now, let me contextualize this for you. The Epstein Files Transparency Act wasn't a suggestion. It was a law passed by a vote of 427 to 1 in Congress. That's near absolute unanimity. Democrats and Republicans, for the first time in a long time, agreed on something. The American people deserve to know the complete truth about Jeffrey Epstein's sexual abuse network and who was involved. Khanna was blunt in saying that the release was a slap in the face to survivors. And he's absolutely correct. Think about the victims who had the courage to report, who lived with the trauma for years, decades in some cases, waiting for justice. And then the federal government, which should protect them and hold their abusers accountable, delivers documents where the most critical information, the names of the rich and powerful men who participated in or covered up the abuses, are hidden behind black ink. Khanna specified that key documents are missing, including the preliminary indictment that actually implicates other rich and powerful men who knew about the abuse or participated in it, plus FBI witness memos with people accused of being on Epstein's island. These documents weren't just redacted, and they simply weren't released. That's the difference between partially complying with the law and completely disrespecting it. And what did the Department of Justice say? Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche stated that hundreds of thousands of pages would be released over the coming weeks. But here's the problem. The law required that all files be released by December 19th, 2025. There was no room for a gradual timeline. The law was clear. 30 days after signing, everything should be publicly available in searchable, downloadable format. This isn't about bureaucracy or document processing. This is about intentional protection of powerful people. Now let's talk about what's really happening here, because it needs to be very clear. This is a cover-up in progress, and I'm not using that word lightly. Khanna publicly announced that he and Massie are drafting articles of impeachment against Attorney General Pam Bondi. This is historic. We're talking about a bipartisan coalition of congressmen preparing to prosecute the head of the Department of Justice for obstruction of justice. And why is this happening? Because the Department of Justice is blatantly violating the spirit and letter of the law. Khanna was crystal clear. The DOJ's production violates the spirit of the law and the letter of the law. There's no ambiguity here. The law didn't give the DOJ the option to decide which names to protect. The law demanded total transparency, with very limited exceptions only to protect victims, not to protect abusers or their facilitators. Let's talk about the names being protected. The Department of Justice claimed to be redacting names of politically exposed individuals and government officials. But this justification completely contradicts the purpose of the law. The law was created specifically to expose politically exposed individuals and government officials involved in Epstein's network. Congress passed this legislation because it doesn't trust the DOJ to do the right thing when it comes to powerful people. And history proves this distrust is justified. Remember the non-prosecution agreement Epstein got in Florida in 2008? A secret deal with federal prosecutors resulted in Epstein serving only 13 months in a county jail, where he was allowed to leave almost daily through a work release program. This for a man who abused dozens, possibly hundreds, of underage girls. The system already failed once, and now it's failing again. Khanna made it clear that Bondi is breaking the law, and that this represents the corrupt system, the Epstein class, that people are tired of. And he's absolutely right. There's a class of people in this country, billionaires, powerful politicians, influential celebrities, who operate under a different set of rules. When they commit crimes, including crimes against children, the system moves to protect them instead of punishing them. Khanna and Massey are considering using inherent contempt, a rarely used tool of Congress to fine or even arrest officials who obstruct legislative functions. This is significant because it doesn't require Senate approval. The House can act alone. Khanna noted that such a measure would fine Bondi for each day she doesn't disclose the documents. But here's what really concerns me. Why is the DOJ protecting these people? What names are so powerful, so dangerous to reveal that the Department of Justice is willing to violate federal law to keep them hidden? Let's talk about the victims, because in the middle of all this political circus, they're the ones being re-traumatized. According to public FBI documents, there are 300 gigabits of files, and the DOJ released only 1 gigabit, less than 1%. And of that, less than 1%, 97% was already in the public domain. So essentially, nothing new was revealed. Imagine you're a survivor of sexual abuse. You spent years, maybe decades, carrying that trauma. You finally had the courage to report. You saw Congress pass a law promising justice and transparency. And then, on the promised date, the government releases documents where the most important information, the names of the men who hurt you or who knew you were being hurt and did nothing, are completely blacked out. Massey, appearing alongside Khanna on Face the Nation, said the Department of Justice is disrespecting the spirit and letter of the law and added, "I will not be satisfied until the survivors are satisfied." This is leadership. This is what political accountability should look like. Putting victims first, not protecting the powerful. But there's a question we need to ask. Who exactly is being protected? President Bill Clinton appears prominently in several of the newly released images, in some cases photographed with women whose identities were redacted. But where are the others? Where are the CEOs, the politicians, the princes, the academics we know had connections with Epstein? And here's something that should make us all furious. Photos, including at least one of President Trump, were temporarily removed from the DOJ's public website, removed, after they had already been released. The DOJ initially claimed there were concerns from victims, but the explanation was inconsistent and the photos were later reposted. This raises an obvious question. If the photos were deemed appropriate for release initially, why were they removed? And who made that decision? Khanna harshly criticized the DOJ for heavily redacting the names of non-victims in the document. That's the central issue. The law allows redactions to protect victims. No one is arguing against that. But the DOJ is redacting names of people who are not victims, people who may have facilitated, participated in, or covered up abuses. This isn't victim protection. This is obstruction of justice. And Khanna was explicit. Any Department of Justice official who obstructed justice may face criminal prosecution in this administration or a future one. Even if the current administration doesn't act, a future Department of Justice can. Massey specifically warned that the law isn't like a congressional subpoena that expires. It's a permanent law, and officials can be prosecuted later. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, partisan politics. Some people might look at this and think, oh, it's just another political circus in Washington. But you're completely missing the point. This is a rare bipartisan issue. Khanna worked closely with Republican Congressman Thomas Massey, and they were confident of getting all 212 Democrats and the 6+ Republicans needed to force a vote. The final vote, 427 in favor, 1 against. That's near unanimity in a deeply divided Congress. When was the last time you saw Democrats and Republicans agree on something with that margin? That should tell you something about the gravity of this matter. Khanna described this as a way to unite the country, saying that a nation that cannot hold rich and powerful men who abused young girls accountable is a nation that has lost its moral and spiritual compass. And he's absolutely right. If we can't agree that men who sexually abuse children should be exposed and punished, regardless of their wealth or political influence, then what kind of society are we? But here's where it gets tricky. Trump amplified conspiracy theories about the files during the campaign, promising to publish information about the financiers' crimes. He signed the law. He appointed Bondi. And now, under his administration, the DOJ is violating that same law. The release of the files would test the loyalty of congressional Republicans, most of whom didn't sign the discharge petition that forced the vote, but almost unanimously voted to approve it. So where are those Republicans now? Some, like Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene, are openly denouncing the DOJ. Green wrote that the goal was not to protect politically exposed individuals and government officials, that this is exactly what draining the swamp means, exposing all of them, the rich and powerful elites who are corrupt and commit crimes. She's right, but where's the rest of the party? Here's the brutal reality. Powerful people in both parties likely appear in these files. This isn't a Democratic or Republican scandal. It's an American scandal. It's a scandal about how our justice system systematically fails when the perpetrators are wealthy and connected. Senator Tim Kaine suggested that impeachment discussions are premature and that Congress has other tools, like appropriations bills, to force compliance. But with all due respect to Senator Kaine, how many times are we going to use soft tools when the law is being openly violated? Khanna noted they only need the House for inherent contempt and are building a bipartisan coalition. This is going to happen. The question isn't if, but when. And when it does, it will force every member of Congress to choose a side. Are you on the side of transparency and justice for victims, or are you on the side of protecting powerful people who facilitated or covered up sexual abuse of minors? Because ultimately, this is about more than Epstein. It's about whether we have two justice systems in this country, one for ordinary people and another for the elite. And if we allow the DOJ to get away with this flagrant violation of the law, we'll be sending a very clear message. If you're rich and powerful enough, you can get away with anything, even crimes against children. And I personally refuse to accept that. If you were as outraged as I am about this scandal, do your part, like this video so more people can see it. Subscribe to the channel because we're going to continue following every development in this case. Nobody's going to sweep this under the rug while I'm reporting. And in the comments, tell me, do you think Pam Bondi should be impeached? Who else should be held accountable? Let's create public pressure because that's what they fear. It's our collective outrage that forces change. So comment, share, make noise. Justice for survivors is non-negotiable.